So, as I mentioned, today we're going to be looking at racial justice. And if I haven't scared you enough, let me just say there'll be some trigger warnings because we're going to talk a little bit about the violence of our history and the violence of our present. And when I first experienced some of these, as I've been doing my training on this, um, I was okay as they talked about the violence against people, meaning okay is I didn't need to run out of the room. There was a guided meditation that was done where they did violence against animals, and I had to leave the room. I just got overwhelmed. I'm not going to do the animal part today because I need to kind of hold myself together. But again, I invite you to just stay calm. So that's stupid to say, not just stay calm. I invite you to care for yourself and do the best you can to care for yourself. And one of the tools we're going to offer is Brenda's going to do a practice song from Deer Park called The Island of Myself. And the first time she's going to sing it will be in just a minute or two, where it'll just be to kind of familiarize yourself with the song so you could hear the first three verses. And this song is a teaching from Thai about returning to our source in ourself. That yes, we have a nervous system that gets over stimulated, and yes, we have a body that can't handle some things, and yes, our mind races sometimes. But we have this resource of the island within ourselves that could just allow all that to be like the wind blowing, but we're in a very safe space. It doesn't mean the wind's not destroying things. It doesn't mean there's not stuff going on. It doesn't mean your body's wrong. It just reminds us that not only are we going to deal with the trauma of our ancestors, but we're also going to draw from the resiliency of our ancestors. Because we are not just the victims of our ancestry, we're also the recipients of the strength of our ancestry. So, Brenda, when you're ready, if you do the first three verses.
Breathing in, I go back to the island within myself. There are beautiful trees within the island. There are clear streams of water. There are birds, sunshine, and fresh air. Breathing out, I feel safe. I enjoy going back to my island. Breathing in, I go back to the ocean within myself. There are dolphins and whales within the ocean. There are strong tides and currents. There are shells, starfish, and seaweed. Breathing out, I feel joy. I enjoy going back to my ocean. Breathing in, I go back to the mountain within myself. There are cliffs and waterfalls within the mountain. There is deep, solid rock, crystals and gems, sparkling caves and high peaks. Breathing out, I feel strength. I enjoy going back to my mountain.
Thank you. So I'd like to start a little bit with recognizing where my studies have come from. I have participated in a retreat that was offered by two previous monastic sisters of Deer Park that um, took the work of Resma Menachen, my grandmother's hands, and really did this beautiful job of synthesizing our practice with what Resma was teaching in his book and how it fits right into our practice of engaged Buddhism. And I want to recognize Resma. I've read his book all the way through. That's rare for me. I haven't read a book all the way through for a long time, but I read Resma's book all the way through. And he's a Black man who is just so loving and caring about caring for all. And one of the terms, or one of the set of terms he uses, is he doesn't call white people white people. He calls us white-bodied people. And then he talked about black-bodied people. We're people, but our bodies are different sometimes. And to pretend like we're identical is a mistake because our bodies look different. So we're equal, but not the same. We have different life experiences. Our ancestry ultimately is the same, but for many thousands of years has been quite different. He also talks about blue-bodied people, law enforcement, and he does it in a very loving way. His book came out right as all the Black Lives Matter movements were going on. And he was reminding us that people who wear blue, our police forces, are still people. And they have a different culture than many of us have. And it's learning to recognize the traumas they experience, but also the challenges they need to address in growing up with all of us. So with my practice of Deer Park, with the teachings of Melinda and Sister Grace, with Resma's work, I share with you where I'm at today. And one thing I've learned over these many, many years is I'm not an expert. Like I said, last Thursday was a great reminder that all I am is someone who's walking this path along with you. I don't have the answers, folks. I'm just looking for other people who want to walk the path with me. And that I don't always want to lead because I have blinders on too. But I'm inviting us all to at least explore this together and see where you want to take it. I'm not calling you to do anything different. I'm not calling you wrong for how you think or believe. This is not about shame. This is not about guilt. This is not about ancestral shame or guilt. This is about recognizing the work we need to do if we're going to heal this planet, if we're going to help heal all the hurt souls out there. So what are the drivers? And I'm going to talk about two primary drivers for racism. One of those drivers, I think many of us will recognize, is out of control capitalism, financial greed. This is not to say people who are in business are necessarily all bad, because most of us are in business of some kind. We need to make a living. We sell either services or goods, but it doesn't make us bad just because we sell or exchange money for services or goods. But when it gets out of control, when people see the accumulation of immense fortunes as their goal, it causes a certain ripple in the way we see other people. And in order for uncontrolled financial greed to take place, we need a workforce that's going to serve the one in charge. In order to have that workforce, we need to have, and for us to make as much money as possible, we need to be able to pay them as least as possible. This didn't start with the slave trade in the United States, but the slave trade is one of the examples of this out of control capitalism, where we were making people, just because the color of their skin, less than us, so that we felt okay about accumulating wealth. This did not start with bringing Chinese workers to build the railroads, but it's a good example of how we depersonalize people that would die. Tens and thousands of people would die as they are laying track, blasting mines, working in the desert, trying to meet that daily expectation. But it's not all in the past, is it? I think if we look today, we still depersonalize people in order for us to feel okay about those people who are making money. Now, some of us may be going, oh, it's not talking about me, thank God. You know, I don't make a lot of money. I don't engage in, I don't buy from Amazon, and I don't buy from Walmart because Walmart doesn't pay working wages. But please hear this, and it's being offered as someone who does the same, as we're all complicit in this, aren't we? Because it's our society. It's the reality we live in. It's the reality we tolerate. It's the reality we experience. And it's the reality we support, is othering others in order for greed to work. But it didn't just begin with the American slave trade. It didn't just begin with the use of Asian workers. It goes long, long ago. And this is where some of the triggers might come in. I'm Italian. The Roman Colosseum, right? Entertainment. Not only were we able to satisfy our need for greed, we were able to entertain ourselves by watching people be killed by animals or each other. Public hangings. Watch your breath. I'm watching mine. I'm saying that because I need to watch mine. But public hangings were not just done in the dark at night. Towns did these hangings, and they became social events. People would bring picnic baskets and bring their kids as entertainment. And need I say, beheadings being drawn and quartered. The Salem witch trials of putting women underwater and they would survive if they weren't witches. You know, that whole mindset were a way of controlling people. This is a hard one. The torture that was done in the name of warring. Pouring molten metal down the throats of living people to torture them, not just to kill them, but to torture them, to maintain the status quo, to keep the king in charge, to keep the guy with all the money surviving. We talked about selling of human beings. Currently, the disproportionate racial incarceration rates still go on. The withholding of voting rights, which is getting worse as we speak. And I'm sure you could fill in others. I'm going to ask Brenda to sing one of the verses of breathing in, just to kind of help us settle at this time.
Breathing in, I go back to the blue sky within myself. There are full moons and planets within the big blue sky. There are wise owls and eagles, there are suns, rainbows and graceful birds. Breathing out, I feel peace. I enjoy going back to my blue sky.
So I talked about some of the obvious ones, but some of the more subtle ones are racist jokes, sexist jokes, anti-LGBTQI plus jokes. And it gets explained away by the media as locker room talk. Locker room talk. That war has been used as a financial tool too, hasn't it? The Crusades, most of the wars that are in the Middle East, about securing oil reserves. Money drives wars. Money drove the war in Vietnam. The war on indigenous people that gets waged every day today. The creation of classes of people. Classes of people. It's subtle, but when we say blue collar, we mean something more than the color of the shirt. You know, we could point fingers at Asian countries that have caste systems, but I will guarantee you here in the United States and in other parts of the world, there are caste systems too. Go to any fancy hotel. Go to a hospital and see how people are treated that don't have insurance or whose job it is to clean up after people or to prepare food. All this is going on. And this doesn't mean you're bad. This doesn't mean you're evil. It means that we are surrounded in this today. It's not something from the past. It's not just something that Donald Trump does. It's not just something with a Confederate flag people do. It exists in our culture in order to support rampant capitalism, rampant need for some people, for many of us, to feel financially secure. A second driver beyond the financial, Resma talks about this. He suggests that white-bodied people need to do that. We as white-bodied people, that I'm saying we, I don't mean everyone here is white-bodied. I'll say me as a white-bodied person needs to do the work that's living inside of our body. Because not even if we didn't participate in the trauma, even if we weren't traumatized, trauma permeated our body through our ancestors. Even as just viewers, spectators. So part of our work is to begin to heal the history of trauma in our culture and discover the impact and reactions that we exhibit today, as well as throughout history, that we're trauma reactive. I'm not trying to do white fragility stuff now. Poor white people, look how weak we are. We're hurt, we're injured, we're vulnerable, and we also benefit from the current status quo. And the trauma reactions that I as a white-bodied person carry continues the history of violence against others. Because I have not dealt with my trauma, I spew my trauma out onto others. I spew it onto my wife. I spew it onto women. I spew it onto people of color. I spew it onto people who speak a different language because I have not taken care of my trauma. So you might say, well, what's this about intergenerational trauma? Is that like woo-woo stuff? Like my parents never told me those stories, so that doesn't affect me. But there's actually a current scientific study on something called epigenetics, that those people who have experienced trauma transmit it to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And what I've learned, I used to think it changed the DNA. It doesn't change the DNA. It changes the chemicals around the DNA, that certain traits will come out more prominently as a result of being exposed to trauma than others. So epigenetics is saying this is not just woo-woo. This is not just, some far-fetched thing. Not that science is the absolute, but science is reinforcing the fact that we carry the trauma of our ancestors in our bodies. Trauma that's untreated is trauma that's transmitted. Can I ask for another verse, Brenda?
Breathing in, I go back to the island within myself. There are beautiful trees within the island. There are clear streams of water. There are birds, sunshine and fresh air. Breathing out, I feel safe. I enjoy going back to my island.
Thank you. So these two drivers that I've spoke of, and there's others, I think are great examples of kind of the Buddhist keys that we've been taught. That we experience pain when we forget about interbeing, and we experience pain when we deny impermanence. That financial, out of control financial gain and unresolved trauma that begets trauma are a result of us forgetting these two key teachings that Buddhism has brought forward. That we are impermanent and that we are. That no matter how much money we accumulate, it'll never be enough. If we took Jeff Bezos's money and we took Bill Gates's money and we took Melinda Gates's money and we took, the richest people in the world money, it won't be enough. There'll be another rocket ship to build. There'll be another yacht to buy, because those two core issues haven't been dealt with. So Resmaa, in his book, suggests one of the things that can help with this is that people need to deal with their trauma. He speaks in different chapters on what white-bodied people can do and what people of color can do and what blue-bodied people can do. And and you might have the same reaction I had when I first heard this. Why do we have to divide ourselves? Why can't we do this all together? We all are swimming in the same soup, but we're not. We all carry different histories. And one thing that Resma points out, and that I've taken years to come to terms with, is that sometimes as a white person, I'm not invited certain places because just the fact of my body color triggers people. And you might go, oh, what's wrong with them? Nothing. Because if I ask you, maybe after we get to know each other really, really well, do you get triggered when a person of color is in the room versus when a person of color isn't in the room? We've been programmed for that. Some people have complained that Deer Park has BIPOC Sangha meetings, retreats that white people aren't invited to. And what has been said is BIPOC people can't do their work if white people are in the room. Not just because they're mad at us, it's because they have to take care of us, take care of white people. Because we haven't begun the work and we start breaking down and we start falling apart. And white people do what they've always done, is they turn to a person of color to take out the chamber pot, to carry our poop out of our reach or out of our smell. So I'm not trying to be racist by what I'm about to say, but I believe, based upon my experience and the teachings I've received, that white people have to do this work with white people. Not because we have something that we have to keep away from, something great that we have to keep away from people of color, but because of the toxicity that comes up when we start truly seeing how we are playing this game along with everyone else. So I'm going to tell you what happened to me Thursday. So I've been working with this other OI member on the East Coast to kind of put together a set of retreats, which I call the Polar Bear Sangha. And I'll explain why. But Polar Bear Sangha, I've done it before with other people. I'm going to be doing it again and starting in April. But I've been working with this person for several months. I think we started in September. And we were planning and we were going to work with white people. And last week, before Thursday, she sent me an email saying, I need to let you know, I need to say something important and I need you to be ready. Oh God, now what? She mad that I said something or. So Thursday we had a Zoom call and she just let me have it about my white superiority. I won't go into the details because I don't want you guys to get lost in that. I will share that later. But right now, I think what's important is I went nuts. I started yelling at her. I say, I'm trying to do this work and you're calling me a demon. And what I realized is my trauma reaction was right there. And what it reminded me of is what Resma has said and what the people at Deer Park have said, is that white people need to feel safe in order to do this work. Calling someone a racist is not going to help them stop being a racist. Calling out racist behavior as you do this and that's racist is not going to change that behavior, because we have a trauma response and we need to protect ourselves and justify our behavior and justify our self-identity. And it happened to me Thursday after 5 years of doing this work. And what I realized is I had forgotten that this work is not about getting better. This work is about being in the work. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be vulnerable and scary and hard and make me look at stuff that I took for granted. And the thing is, she was a white person who said this to me. So I felt totally shamed. I we had shared drive documents. I cut her off. My emails back to her were one word, and it's still going on, folks. But it just one of the things and I will reach out to her and we'll do our work. It may not mean we kiss and make up, but what I've realized is how important it is for this work to be done in a caring, safe way, because the trauma response is still there. And I think if it's in me, it's in other people. It may not be in you, but it's in other people. The second reason I think, and Resma says white people need to do this work. I kind of mentioned the blasting out of trauma, the need for a safe environment for us to do this work. And when I say safe, it doesn't mean that we don't call things out, but we don't do it in an accusatory, in a you need to way. But we do it together, saying, we're walking this path together. Come on, let's do this together. It's hard. The other reason is I talked about briefly is the trauma that comes up when we have these trauma responses. We find the closest, most vulnerable target to spew it on. And unfortunately, in our society, it's women, it's BIPOCs, it's LGBTQI plus, it's kids, it's old people. So as much as possible, we need to not be spewing our trauma out indiscriminately. So we need to create this environment that we're going to be protecting other people. And the final reason is that white people need to discover that diversity is not a Black person's issue. It's not a person of color issue. It's not a gay person's issue. It's a person issue. That truly embracing the diversity of our world will never occur as long as white people are given the chance to see it as a BIPOC issue, a gender issue, an age issue. We need to own this as our issue. It's a person issue. So is there hope? Is there hope? I really think there is, because I discovered after Thursday, I didn't bounce back right away. I'm still bouncing back. Obviously, I'm still charged about it, but it did not do to me what it has done in the past, which number one was blaming that person and making her the enemy. And look at all the good work I've done. How dare you? I said that on Thursday, but I'm starting to realize that was her truth. And how did I get there? Is with our practice. With our Sangha, I thought of every one of you. Every one of you. And I would hope that someday we could have those kind of conversations, maybe not in this Sangha, because this Sangha needs to be a place where we could kind of come and like dust the sand off of our shoes and leave them outside. But I would really like to create a space outside of this time where those of us who'd like to explore this can do this work together and fumble around and work together without someone telling us this is the way you should act, this is the way you should vote, this is the way you should do that together. I'm calling that the Polar Bear Sangha. Now, some people said, why are you calling it the Polar Bear Sangha? Well, number one, people think a polar bear is white, right? How many of you know they're not white? They're not white. Their skin, I mean, their fur are these light transmitting hair follicles. They're clear. So it's reflecting the light of the snow. It's reflecting the color of the snow. Does it make sense that a bear living up in the Arctic with very little sunlight would have a white skin where it couldn't collect heat? So it actually has adopted this white, this transparent fur. So our first impression isn't always the right one. So that's why I'm calling it the polar bear sangha, is that we need to discover the gifts that each of us have, to pull from the resources and the resiliencies of our ancestors as we look at our own history. And so it's a space where I'm going to invite people, and I guess I should say this for free. It is for free. If you're interested to work together on some of these issues, if you want a quick fix, if you want, so I remember reading this book as a teenager, the quickest way to make a friend is find a common enemy. That's not what this group's about. We're not going to blame Trump. We're not going to blame people who vote for Trump. We're not going to blame whoever. We're going to take responsibility for ourselves. Because that's what I found has allowed me to do this work and recognize that when I get called out, because I do have blind spots, and I will always have blind spots, it's the work that's part of it. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's not if you want to come in, get a quick answer, get a quick fix, feel good about yourself. Hopefully you'll feel good about yourself, but not in a superior way. In a way that you recognize how wonderful you are and what you can be to this world. That was a lot. Brenda, would you do one more verse, please?
Breathing in, I go back to the island within myself. There are beautiful trees within the island. There are clear streams of water. There are birds, sunshine and fresh air. Breathing out, I feel safe. I enjoy going back to my